It's the Awake Space with Laurie Rivers. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, and this week is another big shift in energy. We have Uranus moving into Gemini, and it probably already has by the time you're listening to it. It slides in about 7 a.m. Eastern. And this is a whole new layer of energy. It doesn't mean it's bad, though. So many people are making the energy out to be like it's automatically bad and you need to watch out. And, they talk about the American Revolution, the Civil War, etc. And you know me, I'm kind of a stickler. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit of why a lot of what I'm seeing on social media is kind of sort of meh. It's not as accurate as people want it to sound. They speak with a lot of confidence, and we'll talk about why that isn't working. We also have a full moon this week, and the full moon is in Capricorn. It's got some interesting energy with it that you can really leverage, and we'll be talking about that and how you can make the most out of it, even in uncertain times. I know you want me to tell you when it's going to get better, and my answer is always when we make it better. So I'm going to invite you into my field for a little bit. Field of what? Field of energy. Okay. I know I masquerade as the lone astrologer out in the wilderness, but I'm an energy worker. And my job isn't really to predict events, although I do that to get people paying attention and into my field of influence. But my real job is to help you navigate one of the biggest times of change in human history. We have some real opportunities. And I know we like to look at leaders to make those moves. But this time, this big shift, it's not for leaders to lead the way. It's for the people to understand their power. That and more here on the Awake Space podcast. So get your tea, get your coffee, get your iced coffee, get your hot cocoa if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. New Zealand, you too. I know I always mention Australia, but New Zealand too. It's going to be a little cold. Whatever your favorite bevy, if you're having a heat wave, get your water in. Make sure you're drinking that. And whether we are chilling out by the pool or we're driving to work and we will get perfect parking, or we're taking the kids to the park, or we're heading off on a road trip, whatever we're doing, or, including the housework, I love to know how I'm helping you get stuff done. It's super fun. Whatever we're doing together, may this information, may being in this field for this short period of time help you calibrate your energy to make the most out of these moments in time that honestly gift us a great deal of opportunity. All right, let's get the show on the road. Well, I tell you, things are a little bit nuts. We saw what happened in Texas, and the thing that got me that nobody else is talking about is them throwing the meteorologists under the bus when the meteorologists actually gave them a very good forecast that should have meant there were evacuations made ahead of time. And I wanted to talk about this because astrologers and meteorologists have a lot in common. Yes, they're scientists, but meteorology started as astrological processes. Notice how many weather predictions I get right. Does not make me a meteorologist. That is my caveat. I am not. I do have a passing interest in weather because I've lived in places with extreme weather. And that's one of the reasons why when I do the mundane astrology, I'm fairly accurate in my predictions. It's harder to pinpoint locations as an astrologer than it is a meteorologist when they have all of their equipment. So when they have access to the satellite information, etc. However, astrometeorology is one of the oldest forms of astrology, and it has a very long history. No, there's not a lot written about it, guys. There just isn't. Mundane astrology tends to be passed from teacher to student. It's usually not written down. Astrologers don't write down their juicy bits of information because it's their livelihood. And so they'll pass it down to a student or two. And if you're lucky, when you have a teacher run into you. I had a teacher slam into me when I was young. So here's the deal. Whether you're analyzing data that's scientific or you're analyzing data that is creative or you're analyzing data for the weather or you're analyzing data for finance, personal, like astrological traits, it's data. Okay. You have parameters that you work within. You know that if this condition and this condition are present, there is a greater likelihood of a particular outcome. Okay. So when the sheriff of that county, of Kerr County, was describing that they had received a forecast of only 3 to 6 inches, followed up by a 4 to 8 inch prediction, and they got 12 inches. They were not understanding what they'd been given. And the meteorologists have come out, but everybody's still talking about the funding cuts to NOAA and the funding cuts to the NWS. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be fully funded, but I want you to put that discussion away and understand that throwing the meteorologists under the bus is showing the ignorance of the sheriff. So just like when people come at me on my predictions because they didn't listen to them fully or they didn't understand what I was talking about, instead of asking for clarity, they allow their ignorance to run the show, including when they speak words. And that sheriff immediately showed his ignorance about what that volume of rain could mean. Now, I am not speaking as an astrologer when I'm talking about that weather forecast. I'm speaking as somebody who has an interest in meteorology, who lived in the Pacific Northwest a good part of her life. Because precipitation happens a lot. And in the Northwest, in Washington State, which has the biggest rainforest in North America, okay, that's in Forks for all you Twilight fans. But even outside of Forks, there's a hell of a lot of rain. 3 inches of rain in a single day is a lot. That's a lot of water. By 4 or 5 inches of rain in a day, that's where you see salmon swimming through the streets of Seattle. 8 inches of rain, which was the top end of that forecast, is absolutely catastrophic volumes of rain. I've lived through a day that had over 8 inches of rain in the Pacific Northwest. Trees were going root ball first. Okay, they didn't need any wind to fall over. The ground was that saturated. The soil in the Pacific Northwest is made for water. It drains. Now, I've been to the hill country. It's a very beautiful place. It's very beautiful in a very different way than the Pacific Northwest. Okay. It is very dry. The soil is not porous. It's hard pan. It's why they have a lot of cattle grazing instead of herbaceous farms. Okay. And there are farms, but it takes a lot more work to work that soil than it does in the valleys of the Pacific Northwest. Okay. I grew up in Oregon and in the Willamette Valley, and let me tell you that it was not hard to grow things. Okay. So that sheriff saying they didn't give us the right amount did not understand when the meteorologist said, hey, there's a lot of water coming that can produce floods. They gave them a flood warning. What the weather balloon could have done would have maybe showed it was going to stall out. And when a storm cycles or slows down or stalls, it's just a tremendous amount of precipitation. Again, I've lived through weather events like that, and it's a lot. I really think their emergency management plan was very poorly done, and it certainly wasn't executed well, and people died. Throwing meteorologists under the bus is like blaming astrologers for world events when they happen or they don't happen the way people want. It is a distinct lack of understanding of the prediction. Now, again, I've lived in places where the weather was a little extreme. So I learned to pay attention to meteorologists and to listen to what they had to say and not think I knew better. And one of the problems in EMS is there's a lot of machismo and macho behavior. And I know I grew up with a firefighter for a dad, and he's soft and squishy now, kind of, that he's almost 80, but try growing up with that. He was like the Marlboro Man. And if you're old enough to know, you're old enough to know. Younger listeners, you probably won't know who the Marlboro Man is, and you're going to have to look up the Marlboro Man. There's a lot of tough it out. There's a lot of it's a flesh wound, suck it up, buttercup. And a lot of people died because warnings weren't put out. So I would say the emergency preparedness was really poor, and the lack of understanding of a prediction sent to them, a forecast. Forecast and predict mean exactly the same thing. Okay. Forecast means to show before. Predict means to say before, but they mean saying what's going to happen before it happens or showing it. Remarkably huge failure on the part of the county management and on the part of the state. Okay. I don't know what it's going to take for Texas to overthrow these guys because, it seems tragedy after tragedy happens in that state and no change actually occurs, whether it's the power grids or it's schools and children being safe. And, Mike Johnson saying all of people could do was pray for now. That attitude is what needs to change, and people need to be held accountable. And those poor families, I don't want to hear that this is karma for voting for Trump. I've talked a lot about that in my Patreon, especially saying we have to humanize people. And I know I've talked about it on the podcast. We can't just label people and think we can decry who has karma and who hasn't. Those were children. They have families. We may philosophically disagree. We may not share the same theology. We may not even like the same kind of toast. But we need to have compassion for a massive loss of life and for the people retrieving the bodies, for the people who did jump into action. And the thing I can tell you about Texas, having been there are so many good people. I drove through Texas, and 2014, my son and I took a road trip from Seattle to Austin. We drove up the northern route, so we went over the Rockies into Montana and down through Wyoming and Colorado, through New Mexico and across from West Texas into the hill country. That's a long drive. And I wasn't sure what I was going to find when I was in Texas. We were going to visit some friends who were just wonderful. But, there's exceptions to rules, right? And I did not expect the amount of kindness and help and generosity of spirit that I got when I went to Texas, because I'm a West Coastie. I'm the sixth generation from my town in Oregon. And we weren't new when we got there. Yes, colonizer. But I was shocked by how kind people were that we interacted with, and just how helpful and understanding. And in one particular incident, it had been a long drive. We had driven from Colorado, got to, I believe, Amarillo. But the GPS took me off the main freeway, and I was doing country roads. And by the way, it was very stormy at that time. And I was looking out for maybe tornadoes or big water, and you could see where things had flash floods as we drove around. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in a Yaris of all things, little tiny Toyota. As we drove, I had filled up every chance I could get, but we'd been driving for a long time, and I had only a quarter of a tank left, and we were still in the boonies. And the GPS finally had me take a right, and then a left, and then another right. And all of a sudden, we went from gravel county roads onto tarmac, onto the asphalt of a regular paved road. We got to an actual stop sign. It was like 1 second we're in one environment, the next we're in another. It was a very abrupt change. And there was a big billboard over the steakhouse that said, this is God. You were asking for a sign. And my son and I started laughing, and we got in, and parked and into the steakhouse. And I was rummy. I was worn out. I'd probably driven 14 hours, because we had literally left Colorado Springs, and I hadn't found a place I really wanted to stop at. Because again, I was on twisty county roads. I wasn't on a freeway, and I was tired. And I got in, and I was probably dehydrated, and I was swaying on my feet. And the host of the restaurant looked at me and he went, "Ma'am, are you okay?" And I said, "I've driven a long time." And he said, "Yeah, is that your car out there?" And I had Washington plates. I'm like, "Yes, sir, it is." He goes, "You need some water." I'm like, "Yes, sir, I do." And I went to the ladies and tried to wash up and tidy myself a little bit. And my son and I sat. This guy brought me the biggest pitcher of water you ever saw. And he just made sure we were okay. He didn't think I was inebriated or in bad shape. I looked as tired as I was. And his first thought was, "Are you hydrated?" There's a lot of good people in Texas just like that. Think of all the people who are showing up to help their neighbors. It's easy to be angry right now, especially after that disastrous piece of legislation got signed on our Independence Day. And it's hard to have compassion when bully boys are kidnapping people in the streets. But we still need to see each other as humans. And we need to understand, if we're to make it through this time in one piece, that in the United States, we see each other as neighbors. And we have compassion, we have empathy, and we humanize people. That doesn't mean give people a pass from things they need to be held accountable for. But we don't need to dehumanize people to hold them accountable. If we do that, we are the same as those who would say they are our enemies. Okay. So that's me on my soapbox. Predictions are never set in stone facts. They are communications from someone with expertise in a field of study with a knowledge base that gives a range of data and information to people. Okay. That's why I will say most likely, or it could happen. We might see. Those are the conditional language devices that I use. Meteorologists give ranges of volume of precipitation. Have you ever had somebody say 0 to 1 inch of snow? Although where I lived in Northwest Washington, every time this particular weatherman on the TV would say 0 to 1 inch of snow, we knew we were getting 3 feet. Because in order to produce the right kind of conditions to have it snow in that one spot, if it started, especially in the evening, it wasn't going to stop. Okay. If it started in the morning, it might be 0 to 1 inch because it might have a chance to warm up a little bit. But if it started in the afternoon or in the evening, we knew we weren't driving anywhere the next day. Hills, and the snow turns to compacted ice on the roads there. So 3 to 6 inches is what they said. That's a lot of water. Just the low end was a lot of water. 4 to 8 inches is a lot of water. That's like saying there could be an earthquake ranging between a 4 and a 6. The seismic measurements on the Richter scale, there's a huge difference between a 4 and a 5 and a 5 and a 6. Okay. Huge differential. Okay. So these are important things to remember. And when you're listening to an astrologer, anybody who says this is going to happen for certain is trying to be a prophet. You know someone's an analyst when they use conditional language. One way is unethical. The other way is using proper protocols, methodologies, and processes. Okay. That's how you tell the difference. Because anybody trying to sound like Baba Vanga or anybody being a prophet or wanting to be an oracle, that's fortune telling. Somebody giving analysis is going to use conditional language. We could see this. We might see that. By the way, Malcolm's in the studio. He's trying to make the rug more comfy. You know, when they dig a little nest, like, why is the plant about to fall over? Anyway, he's making himself comfy. He might come up to say hi in a minute. Right now, he's just grooming, getting comfy. He gets really worried when I leave him at home. And if you're new to the podcast, Malcolm's my dog. So anyway, so just to let you know, that's the analysis on there. So let's talk about Uranus in Gemini. What can we expect? And here's the deal. Expect the unexpected. You heard me. Expect the unexpected. Gemini's kind of Joker energy. It's curiosity. It is the concrete mind versus the higher mind in metaphysics. So the concrete mind is where, think about engineering. If you want to pour some concrete, the construction, the math of construction, the math of an astrology chart. That's the concrete mind. The higher mind deals with interpretation, ideas, ideals, inspiration, genius. Okay. And so it's an interesting energy. We're elevating our thoughts. Can't really use it before it was noticed by humans, discovered by humans, which was, I believe, 1781. And I believe by Herschel. And 1776, it wasn't in operation yet. Also, all the people talking about the American Revolution and Uranus Uranus or Uranus. I love how other people have been stealing my Uranus. You know, I've caught a whole bunch of new content creators. I'm like, Uranus. I'm like, most people don't pronounce it that way. They either say Uranus or they say Uranus. I just chose to say Uranus, which in the transcripts will look like your nose. Also funny. Uranus and Gemini. Expect the unexpected. It's just going to be weird. Okay. So one of the ways we lean into it, because at 0 degrees, any of the outer planets are just wild card energy. You know, we have to observe them for a hot minute to kind of get a grasp of how they're expressing within that spectrum of understanding. But we'll have Uranus in Gemini in a sextile with Saturn and in a trine with Pluto. Pluto's retrograde. That's a little bit of interesting energy. It's really going to be destabilizing in society for a little bit. People are going to start asking a lot of questions. We may hear a lot of profound questions. Information is going to be popping like popcorn. And the tech sector is probably going to be doing some very interesting things. I think we'll see more use of drones on a lower end. AI is certainly going to expand under this. It's not sentient. It's not conscious. Okay. What is confusing for people is it has been trained to speak in the first person. So you feel like you're having a conversation with a thinking, feeling, sensing being. That groan was Malcolm. Malcolm, do you want to come up? Or am I just talking and interrupting your nap? I'm interrupting his nap. I don't even know if you could hear it because this mic does a pretty good job of being directional, but he was just like, oh. So it's like, you're disturbing me. But anyway, so it could be a little wild. It could be a little wild. Coming up with the full moon, on a personal level, I think that full moon is kind of magical. I think it's a really important time to deconstruct inside of ourselves, just let some of our own adherence to patriarchy, internalized misogyny, internalized power dynamics, just to let it go, let it release. I think this full moon is great for that. And then finding our actual power. I'm very excited because I'll be teaching this week in my summer program, Align and Thrive. There's still a little time to sign up if you want to. If you get the whole meal deal, you get Finding Your Psychic using astrology. You get Healing the Money Wound. You get the Professional Development Series. First class is on for the Professional Development Series, where we're not using astrology for that. I'm literally giving you professional development training. The first of 8 classes on that is setting expectations with clients or customers and client management tools. Because a lot of times you get certified like as a counselor, a coach, a graphic designer, maybe even as an engineer, or maybe you go to medical school, but nobody teaches you how to get a job. Nobody teaches you how to run your practice. So if you decided to become a doctor in private practice, you do your residency in the hospitals. But unless you get a mentor or you then go into private courses, you don't really know how to run a practice. You learn about the laws, you learn about your rights and obligations, but you don't learn much about anything when it comes to marketing. And some industries have a lot of rules around finance, and medicine have a lot of rules around how they can market. But still, you don't get taught about how to start and end with a patient. And that's why so many people have bad bedside manners because they've got all the knowledge and some technical skills, but they don't know how to interrelate with people. The people who can interrelate with others do pretty well. So that's what starts on the 8th. But there's time to sign up. You can check out the show notes. I'm excited to teach the things I wanted to teach for a long time. I used to teach these at an online business school way back in 2013, 2014. And it's really exciting to be able to do it under my own banner. I've had these curriculums in play for a while, and I've worked with my clients on doing these things as well. But it's going to be super fun. Marketing magic is another part of that. That's a class, and aligned content creation, which is also exciting. So if you're already in, make sure if you got the monthly payment plan and you haven't been able to get in the groups, hold tight. I'll get you in before we start. I don't give homework ahead of the first sessions. Okay. I just don't, if I'm assigning homework. So there's no rushing ahead. I hold everybody and I pace you, because I found that because people went through public school, which is designed to warehouse people to have them prepared for a post-industrial economy, people have learned to either rush through it and just get it done so you can pass the test. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, if you do that. Or people are wanting to be like really good to impress the teacher. I'm not grading you. This is personal development and professional development. The only person you need to impress is you. I am the vessel delivering information. What you do with it is up to you, but I don't like people rushing ahead. I like people to make those transformations like a time release capsule. I keep hitting my mic. Oops. All right. So what's coming up next? Obviously, we're going to do some patron shout outs, because without patrons, this podcast doesn't happen. And I'll give you what to expect in the headlines. And I'll talk more about that full moon as we move towards the end. And I'll give you the update on what's going to happen in Patreon this week, because there's some cool stuff. All right. All right, let's do what's in the headlines, then we'll do some patron shout outs and do the full moon. All right, we're going to talk about what is in the headlines, and I've got my handy dandy readers on. They kind of help. The problem is with these contacts, they're designed for me to use while driving. So I can see really, really far away. I don't know. When I'm trying to read on my phone, there is no way farther than this arm. Okay. Even with the cheaters on, I'm like, tell you. Did I tell you it's my birthday month? I turned 56, which makes me officially pushing 60. I feel like I'm like in my 30s. I don't understand. I am confused by the passage of time. All right, let's take a look at what we've got in the headlines for this week. I know, you guys know what it means when I start to laugh. Welcome to the shit show. Oh, guys, I would love it to get better too. But you know what? We are in a massive initiatory process as a species. So that's right. I'll talk about that later. All right. July 6th through the 9th, we have the moon in Sagittarius, and it's piping hot and it's spilling beans, especially like once it just enters on the 6th, because it's going to be in a trine with Neptune, which is retrograde. And Neptune retrograde is all about spilling the beans. It's the truth telling, the clear seeing. So that should be fascinating. But anyway, we've got big fire rages out of control. Could be a homeless encampment or public land in the United States, or a bushfire elsewhere in the world. Depends on where you live and what they're called. Explosion due to corrosive materials, especially near waterways. Extreme heat, record-breaking temperatures, major issues with marine travel, issues at ports or on cruises. And it could be another poop cruise. All ceasefire attempts fail. So we're going to see things kind of erupt in the Middle East and different places. And, I don't think it'll be Iran hitting Israel, but it'll probably be Israel claiming something that Iran did, and they'll smack them. We can see issues with the United Nations, NATO, EU, and other international organizations. They could be having crises. Supreme Court justices in the headlines, or it could be high courts in other countries. High profile bankruptcy, so like a big corporation or a brand name, something you wouldn't expect. And remember, not all bankruptcies mean they're going out of business. Some bankruptcies are restructuring. Treasury and federal bank in the United States under pressure. Probably Trump is going to call Powell names again, and Powell's just going to be like, so what? But it's funny when he can't believe someone. Congress in turmoil, constitutional crisis. We could see that. Acts of war or terrorist attacks. And that could be anywhere. We could see something in the United States this week that looks like a terrorist attack. We could. But I think it's more with the full moon. But I could be wrong. We could see a big accident at sea. It could be a hull, a ship, capsized boat. Someone lost at sea, a refugee boat with people having accidents. Or Navy's skirmish, or all of it. All of that could be up in the headlines. U.S. dollar holds value. Bonds remain stable. Markets stay steady. Info leaked regarding Elon Musk. We could see political violence, nationalism, right-wing and left-wing clash. That's global. Issues with navies, submarines, or warships. International agreements fail or are suspended. Journalists speak out, refuse to comply with censorship, and double down on resisting attacks on free speech. Religious leaders or organizations may be under fire, or they may be the one firing. Maritime incidents, accidents, or issues in ports. We could see a political leader fall ill, have public health crisis, or leader of some party, any party globally, has issue that is impossible to deny. So there's no cover up. They're caught red-handed. And it could be a serious health concern or even an accident, especially with Uranus popping into Gemini. We could see a high-profile figure on the 7th have an accident. Big international accident involving other people from many countries, or involves a border crossing. Accidents with missiles and or satellite launches, or even SpaceX. There could be some issues there. Explosions, chemical plant failures, and nuclear waste. Earthquakes have above a 6.0 offshore, more likely, as are volcanoes that have lava flows, or underwater volcanoes. Keeping my eye on Japan with that. I had an underwater volcanic eruption between July 5th and the 7th, so that could fall into that time frame as well. There was a volcano that went off in Japan, just not the underwater one I'm looking at. July 9th through the 11th, we have the moon in Capricorn, and it's showing who really is in charge. So, and it ain't anybody who says they are right now. We may see some revelations about where the power really stands. And this could also be a massive weather event. We could see rain, flooding, ice melt, erosions, rockside sinkholes, or infrastructure failures could involve massive loss of life and or infrastructure. This would be anywhere there could be a rainstorm. This is a tremendous amount of wind, a tremendous amount of precipitation. It could be a hurricane. It could be part of a tropical storm. But as we saw in Texas, it doesn't have to be super windy. In fact, sometimes if a storm stalls and cycles, and it just keeps hanging out in one spot, it can just dump a tremendous amount of rain. I've lived through a storm like that, and it's just unbelievable how much rain can fall. So keep your eye on the forecast. Even though the NWS has had cuts, they are still doing their damnedest to get those forecasts out to the weather apps and things like that. Okay, so keep your eye on what radar you can find. Let's see, failed dictatorships, authoritarians deposed, forced out or voted out, and that's global. This could be anywhere in the world. Issues with sea level rise and or flooding. So this is anywhere in the world, but we're going to look at coastal areas with tides. Discussion of water and mineral rights and public land use. That's going to be up in the headlines between the 9th and the 11th. Let's see. Immediate blowback for gaffes in public speaking. Popular person or person of note says something that gets them canceled or loses them support. So somebody says something so stupid or so egregious, it loses even their greatest supporters. Leadership of all kinds is challenged. Big event, historic event, could be violence, storms, terrorism, or political upset. And that may come with that full moon in Capricorn. It might even come just ahead of it. Okay. Maybe in the 9th evening. Bombings, terrorist attack, explosion of some kind. I've got my eye actually on the East Coast, more specifically in the Washington, D.C. area, probably around places of note. I know they've got a lot of security, but you never know what happens. King Charles or other royal could face a deepening health crisis, or there's an announcement around their health. Landslide, mudslide, rockfall, sinkholes. Let's see, issue with military jet or helicopter, air accident or train derailment. Donald Trump under strain. It's not a great full moon for him. It's just not. It's putting a tremendous amount of strain on his kidneys, and we'll see what happens with that. Security problems in public spaces, civil unrest, and protests global. Elon makes big statements and is also under pressure. Corporate failures, CEOs removed, and bankruptcies announced. Public figure, political leader has a health crisis that leads to hospitalization or happens in public view. It could be an illness, a fall, a neurological issue. This is global. Don't get your hopes up, but maybe. Again, don't get your hopes up. I'm just saying, maybe. You guys are going to drive me nuts with it. You act like I can magically see this stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm doing calculations in my head. I don't have the universe whispering in my little seashells. I wish I did. Issue with an oil pipeline, platform, or drilling operation at sea. Seismic activity increased, potential up to 6.5, or there could also be volcanic action offshore, mostly around that full moon, probably that'd be a release. Issues at U.S. borders, accidents on mountain or at high. Issues at U.S. borders, accident on a mountain or at high elevation, Violence could break out in the United Kingdom, and that's anywhere, including Northern Ireland. So there's that. And then let's see, we got that moon in Aquarius. That's going to be a little bit interesting. So the 11th, Friday to Sunday the 13th, we've got the moon in Aquarius. And when I'm reading it from the magazine here, it says the moon in Aquarius is spitting lasers. So I always forget what I write. So I amuse myself. All right. We got big wind. Big wind. If you thought we've had bad wind this year, just wait till Uranus hits Gemini. That's just, it's doubling down, and it's in a sextile with Pluto. So this is just very powerful winds. Southern hemisphere could face massive storms with surges and erosion causing waves. We could see a tsunami in the Asia Pacific region. Satellites, cell towers, or internet cables fail, topple, or cut. So this could be something happening in the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea. Stuff could be going on in that area. Solar storm or northern lights or both happen. We could see communication failures, satellite malfunctions, internet glitches, and hacking announced. Censorship, new terms of service in social media, or popular creator influencer loses account. That could be all of it or none of it, some of it. AI accident because of AI or use of AI shown to be problematic in a serious way. So, all those CEOs getting their rocks up thinking they can fire a bunch of employees and replace them with AI, they're going to find out. So this is the FO stage of the FAFO cycle. International agreements and treaties fail, international disruptions, satellite failures, huge protests in Eastern Western Europe, Southern Hemisphere deals with sudden storms, snow, ice, or erosion causing events, innovations announced in tech or medical equipment, military helicopter, jet, or plane could have an accident, not just the United States military, this could be any military. Icebergs, melting glaciers, and sea ice, AMOC, that is the Atlantic current, and climate change, fertilizer, farm technology, and land could be up on deck, especially farm equipment. Stabbing, teaser misuse, cattle prods, electric shocks, drone attacks in public spaces. This could be either tasers used by officials, but it could be a member of the public runs around with cattle prod. It's going to be weird. Okay. If it happens, we could see vehicular violence in crowded spaces on the increase. Big issue in Asia or Asia Minor. Explosive event could include acts of war, seismic activity. Surprise announcement regarding political leader, figure, or elected official. Dollar dips or money market and bonds or commodities are all unstable. Tech sector volatile. Issues with AI and more layoffs, hurricanes, tornadoes, big windstorm, massive windstorm. Tech sector volatile, issues with AI and more layoffs, public uprisings, protests, and graffiti. Something to do with Banksy, maybe. I think we might also hear something about Julian Assange or someone compared to him. We'll also see missile launches, bombings, and drone attacks. I think Israel and Iran might get heated back up again. Israel can't sit on its hands for long. It loves its preemptive strikes. So just a reminder, this is just for what's up in the headlines. There's lots of good stuff that's coming. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how you can make the most out of this full moon energy coming up, because that's mundane and it's what we can see in the headlines. It doesn't mean it's the only things happening. It doesn't mean there isn't any good news, and it doesn't mean it's going to be bad for you personally. You got to learn how to train the mind to understand that lots of things that can seem like opposing ideas can happen on the same day. Okay? Nothing is all bad. Nothing is all good. Some things are neutral, but headlines tend not to be the best of humanity. Okay? So coming up next, we're going to talk about our Patreon, what's going on in Patreon. If you want to know the schedule of events, what we're doing this week. And I'll give my shout outs to our newest patrons, because without patrons, the Awake Space is not ad free and free to listen to. So make sure you thank our patrons in the comments. All right. All right, it's that time. So, thought I'd do a little announcement about what's happening in the Patreon, just so if you were thinking about joining and you're like, I don't know what happens there. I purposely don't put up a schedule or a calendar. I know some people do, but when I do, it just doesn't work. You see, I have the South Node in Virgo conjunct Pluto. So anytime I give a rigorous schedule, which I prefer, again, it's my South Node, I like to be very organized. However, it is not my dharma in this lifetime to have a schedule. And so that is why I do not have one. One of the things I think people have is a lot of FOMO, like missing out on chats when I do audio live streams, or when I pop in to do chats, etc. You don't have to catch everything. There's so much material you can listen to. There's the Q&A library. There's the collections for beginning astrology, meditations. In fact, speaking of meditations, I'm gonna make a couple that come out this month to help deal with some of this very volatile energy. It's really kind of wacky energy. So, and people be like, "Oh, grounding." No, we're not. We're not going to be grounding anytime soon. We can recenter, we can learn to recalibrate, but none of us are going to find any grounding or rooting or rootedness probably until Saturn gets into Taurus. And that's coming up, what, end of 2027, early 2028, something like that. I know I have my second Saturn return in 2028. Super exciting. So we're not going to ground, but we can recalibrate. And I'm making some very, very special recordings for patrons at the different levels. So people who are at the higher levels are going to get maybe more advanced visuals that really resonate, because the people who can feel who I am, they come in different spaces. So again, it's not just about the predictions or the entertainment value, even though I try to make sure it's entertaining, but there's a lot of important energy that's transmitted through my work, even here on the podcast, because as a world server, as a world teacher, it's my job to help you navigate through this immense initiatory process in the world. And of course, the more you come in and in through commitment, the deeper the transmissions of the energy are. So, and people will resonate where they resonate. It's no harm, no foul, no better, no worse. It's just there's layers of intensity. So there's that. So let's talk about our newest patrons. Let's say hello to our newest patrons. Let's see. It's my birthday month, and if you join as a new subscriber, you get a special discount. So hop over to the Patreon if you've been on the fence, so you can get the most out of saving significant amount on your first year. Who are our newest members? Alexandra, Chloe, Lori, Myra, Dragon, Jenna, Starry-Eyed Kitty, Jenna, Wendy, Abby, Carrie, Selena, Joanna, Claire, Ella, Patricia, Cynthia, Cami, Van, Bjorn, Zach, Amy, Leah, Ivana, Tina, Kitty. Oh, you told me how to do it. Kaida, Alicia, Jen, Rachel, Alexandra, Ashley, Kelly, Woo Woo Mayu, Barbara, Achia, Renee, Loud Lotus, Catherine, Haya, Patty, Saf, Rachel, JJ, Jake, Sapphire, Michelle, Jeanette, Seth, Xana, Carmen, Psychic Lauren, Annie's Mind, Misty, AG, Ann, Julie, Honey or Hanny, Lauren, C, Kelly, Lindsay, Jess, Quinn, Laura, Bailey, John, Carolina or Carolina, Jackie, Eli, Katie, Amanda, Janelle, Gabby, Christy, Wendy, Rose, Chelsea, Sophia, Lydia, Leslie, Jeannie, Sarah, Weary Witchy, Mooncake, Chris, Amber, Jackie, the tofu seller, Amy, Ashley, Courtney, Jessica, Melanie, Cassidy, Emerald, Valerie, Danielle, Winter, Catherine Marie, Elena, Jennifer, Spooky Latte, Elizabeth, Nicholas, J Leaf 1609, Kayla, Sarah, Cassidy, Beam, Vanessa, 8 Bits, Head in the Heart, Cassandra, Candace, Ariana, Angel, Dawn, Jenny, Katie, Christina, Laura, Ashley, Larissa, Marlo, Alyssa, Teresa, Robin, Amanda, Emily, Shannon, Courtney, Kim, Fake Gillian, Alexa, Emily, Wendy, Hannah, Emily, Danny, Brandelion, Gabby, Imelda, Vermicelli Magnifico, Marla, Joshua, Alicia the Cynic, Megan, Carradine, Echo, Jessica, Maisha, Rebecca, Vina, Christina, Riley, and Tatiana. Wow, thank you all so much for being members. Without you, there is no me. All right, let's talk about what we can do with this full moon energy. And of course, I will give even more detail in the Patron only podcast. Let's talk about that full moon in Capricorn and what we can do with that energy. So full moons are always a release. The most powerful moment before a full moon is just the hours before it makes it full. Okay. You aren't feeling the moon be full before it's full. You're feeling the waxing gibbous phase. And that's where the pressure builds. Okay. So when people are saying, I feel the full moon in advance. No. There are 8 moon phases. When you're feeling it in advance, you're actually feeling the phase before the full moon. That's the intensity. Because you have all this energy building and there's a release in the full moon. And so people can be emotional during a full moon. You can have, just be teary. You might blow your top. People who have less control of their consciousness tend to act out when we see things that look like lunacy, right? That means being impacted by the moon, especially the full moon. If you are a healthcare worker, if you work in EMS, then you know all about full moons and people doing crazy things. Not everybody does crazy things during a full moon, and yet none of us are exempt from it. We all have our moments, do we not? So here's the deal with the full moon. By the way, if you do work in a hospital or in an emergency department or you're EMS, firefighter, etc., this one's going to have some crunchy accidents. You may see a lot of broken bones, joints bending the wrong way. You could see fingers stuck in car doors. There will probably some really spectacular spectacular car accidents. But there could be some miracle saves, so it's not all bad. But there's some stuff with this, especially again if you work in healthcare or you're in an emergency field. Those are the type of accidents or injuries you might see. It's going to be interesting. I'm trying to sit comfortably. Excuse me. I feel like, lift them, suck it in. Anyway. Oh, the end of the podcast. All right, I'm tired. I've been recording for hours. Only you knew what goes into these things. People think, oh, it's got to be simple. You just have a mic and you talk. Oh, Lord. Anyway, it's easier than many other things I have done in life. Let's put it into perspective. Fine, I won't lean. Oh my God, this makes me sit up straight. And that's some of the energy, is showing up in her best light, not being slouchy, not being messy. We've got Mars in Virgo trining off with this full moon. It's in an exact trine about 10 hours ahead of the full moon itself. But that energy carries on. If you want to show up in your own authority, if you want to show up with all of your agency, you can't half-ass it. And that's what this full moon is saying. Now, not talking about perfection, but most people start things a little less than committed. Okay. They don't want to put in the time. They don't want to put in the discipline. They want to be an instant expert. I've seen it in any special interest or hobby or field I have studied. Okay, people read one book and they think they know. They've done 2 whole years of study and they think they are qualified as an expert. No, that's not how it works. It was one of the things I found out even as a hand spinner, where you spin yarn on a spinning wheel. And I have the opposite problem. I will study and 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 never quite feel like I know enough until I'm like 5-10 years in. Once I've got 5 years in, I'll be like, all right, I think I've got this mastered. Now I can call myself an expert. But that's because I really look up to learned people, and I'm not going to think I've mastered something. In fact, I still don't call myself a master astrologer. I mean, once in a while to establish, that I am, and I really truly am. I've been at this for 30 years. It's consumed my life. I didn't just sit and read a couple of books and pull charts once in a while. This has been an everyday thing since 1995. And I've read for thousands of people around the globe, every walk of life, every vocation, every calling you can think of, whether it's CEOs and other C-suite executives, politicians, people from institutional wealth, people who didn't have nothing, students of all kinds, professionals of all kinds. I'm always excited about the scientists and the engineers. When scientists and engineers book with me, I feel very privileged because I know they're watching that I have a methodology, and it's like always a compliment. But I've had artists and musicians and people who live in the more intuitive realms. I say all these things to go with this Capricorn full moon because this is about owning expertise that you possess, and rightly so. Okay, you've got the time, you've got the experience, and you're showing up as somebody who can claim whatever experience you have legitimately. Okay. One of the worst things you can do is adopt false expertise. The other worst thing you can do is to not admit your expertise when you have it. And the wonderful astrologer Joanne Wickenburg, when I was in my 30s, said, Laurie, just write the books. you don't need any more qualifications. And I couldn't hear her, thought she was just being nice because I was so hard on myself. And this is about truly owning your expertise if you've got it. Now, what do you do if you're young? If you're under 25, if you're under 30, you have expertise though. There are things really, really well. And if it's video games, then let's have a chat. Okay. Video games teach you problem solving skills. There's analysis. If you play an MMORPG, then you know how to communicate and collaborate. You're an expert in team organization. What's your role if you're in a guild? What is your role in that? Do you show support? Are you an expert in supporting others? That's one of my son's things. He's like, I don't want to be in charge. I want to be the best number 2. Okay. And I'm like, well, explain that. And he goes, look, the number 1 needs a really good number 2 because the number 1 has a lot of work and I'm a really good support person and I want to support a good leader. I don't necessarily want to lead. And his logic is because it's hard to find a good number 2. I was like, that, my son, is genius because you're not wrong. So Capricorn deals with authority. Okay. It deals with ambition. What's in the way of your ambitions, my friends? It's you. You're in the way. It is not just society. It is not just the government. It is not just rules and regulations. If we go back through history, there have always been individuals who moved against the norm. And they may have had consequences for it, but they did it anyway. Whether it was societal norms, cultural norms. Think of Oscar Wilde. Yes, he did do jail time for being a homosexual, and he also got out of jail and continued to write and afflict the comfortable. Was it fair? No, it wasn't. But life often isn't. And so it is about showing up as yourself. I do believe in remaining as safe as possible. Okay. Not everybody is connected like Oscar Wilde was. Oscar Wilde still had enough connections that even though he was jailed and made uncomfortable, he could have faced far worse fates. Okay. He was connected within society. We have to understand where we are privileged and where we're not when we stand up in our full authority. But most times, for most people, a lot that is in our way is ourselves. Whether you're holding yourself to too high a standard, or you're thinking you need more qualifications, or you think you need more education, or you think you need better equipment, or you think. That's not always the case. If you never start, you don't know. People think failure is a terrible thing. It's not. It teaches you. And in fact, I don't believe in failure. Would be a good attitude to adopt. There's learning and there's growing, and you're either doing one or the other until the day you die. Period. Okay. So if you've been holding yourself back, if you've been waiting for somebody else to tell you you're ready, if you've been waiting for permission, the only person's permission you need is your own. And if you think you need more money, you don't have enough capital, I'm going to argue with you. No, that's not true. I'm completely self-funded. And I didn't have a lot. In fact, that's how I became an astrologer professionally. It's like I was a single mom. I came back to the States with 2 kids, $50. No one would hire me. They didn't believe my resume because they didn't trust email back in the 90s. You know how nobody likes AI? Well, guess what? Nobody liked email. And no one believed I had been to 23 countries, 4 continents, because I was a cute little thing. And when I was 29, I looked like I was about 12. People always thought I was my kid's babysitter, and which 30 is so young. We make these Hollywood has really fucked up people's perception of age. But anyway, no one believed this cute little thing had been very brave and gone to a lot of different places and worked at some very prestigious occupations and did a lot of really cool things. And I got a hold of my astrology teacher. I'm like, I don't know what to do. Do you see anything in the transits? I I'm trying to get a job and nobody's hiring me. And he was like, better put your shingle out there. And I was like, what? And he's like, no, you just read astrology charts. And I was like, oh, I don't think I know enough. I've only been at this 3 years. And he goes, you've been doing it 8 hours a day for 3 years. I think you're ready. Oh, and I'm like, well, I don't know what to do. How do I get started? And he's like, put an ad in the classifieds. And I was like, okay, so this is the newspaper. There was like the penny saver. There was was that the nickel ads? Something like that. There were all these cheesy little papers, before print was obsolete. And I put in, astrologer, private readings, X amount of dollars, call the number. And people got a hold of me right away. I did not charge enough because I didn't know what to charge. I didn't know what people were charging. There was no way to know that stuff. Nobody told me. And I didn't even know where to look. And so I probably read 10 or 15 people at an ungodly, unreasonably cheap price, even in the 90s. And I would meet them in public spaces because I could not afford an office space. So I would take the bus maybe an hour into town and I would meet in a public space, and it was a little dicey sometimes. And then I finally found another professional astrologer locally, and they were charging a lot more than me, which I was fine with. I just saved my money, and I went and I had a reading with her, and she was a really good astrologer. She was also a social worker / counselor, and she was really, really good. And I got some idea of how to start and end a session from her because, again, nobody trained you. That's why I'm doing the professional development workshops in July to help people learn some basic skills in managing clients, starting and ending on time, not giving yourself away, how to price, things like that I didn't get. I didn't know. I learned from experience, and experience is what makes you an expert. Knowledge does not make you an expert. Understanding how to apply the knowledge makes you an expert. Just because you can regurgitate information, well, I don't need somebody who can regurgitate. I have the internet at my disposal and discernment and common sense, and I can look up knowledge. How to use the knowledge is what's worth time with people. And so you want to look at, what do you know? What do you have experience in? Experience is often learned through hard knocks. You can know it in theory all you want until you've stepped into it. And that's what this full moon is about. It's about owning your expertise and then planning on what you're going to do with it. Okay. How are you going to make use of the energy? And that's super, super important. Okay. So I'll be talking about this more in depth on the Patron only podcast. And that's going to be super fun. And let's see, what else is going to happen this week? We have so much. We have so much happening all at the same time. It's crazy sauce. It's crazy sauce. If you watched last week's episode, you saw the July slides. So just this week, the 6th, we have Venus sextile Saturn and Venus sextile Neptune. This could be some pretty interesting energy. When we find out some more information about leaders, and again, the economy looks pretty good with that. But fibs will be uncovered. Of course, we have Venus is trining off with Pluto as well. and she's supercharging the people. And so it's a really good idea for you to really think about how you want to communicate yourself and how you want to communicate your empowerment. That's a great way to use that energy. Let's see. Saturn station is retrograde at the end of the week. And this is going to put a little more pressure on leaders. So will that full moon. So having Saturn retrograde on July 12th. And it's not going to be retrograde first thing in the morning, probably. I can look here. So Saturn stations on the 12th, and it's retrograde on the 13th. It spends about 24 hours stationed, maybe a little more. And station means it looks like it's stopped in the sky. But I think authoritarian governments and authoritarian so-called leaders, my way or the highway people, are going to have some problems. I look forward to that. A little bit of schadenfreude. Expect some of those county officials to be in trouble. They've been throwing meteorologists under the bus and not wanting to talk about things. Now is not the time to talk about it, kind of like when there's a school shooting, don't politicize this, even though people died. They may start getting some heat they haven't had in the same way. And it could be that somebody well-connected or very privileged or in the high levels may have lost someone, or was impacted or is connected to someone. And this may be the start of some change in that county at the very least, maybe not in the state, but you got to start somewhere. Hopefully someone will be held accountable for not giving adequate warning because it wasn't the meteorologist's fault. Yes, they needed the equipment, but according to the meteorologist's office, they were missing senior staff who would communicate the information. And I was married to a state employee, and he had to deal with county people. And they did emergency management planning. And a lot of times, county sheriffs are not always the brightest bulbs in rural areas. Sometimes they are. We actually had a great one for a while. But sometimes they're a little macho and a little thick-headed. And a couple times when it was down to emergency management planning, my ex-husband had to yell at some county officials for having rocks in their heads. And that's the kind of staff they left, the people with the seniority who could get away with saying, look, you dodo brain, we need to get an emergency signal out. Get the bat signal up. So we may see some of that with this full moon energy, because remember, the moon stays full for 3.5 days. It changes signs every 2.5 days. So, yeah. So next week, I have an amazing guest. I have Ms. Olivia Edward, daughter of John Edward, the psychic medium, who's a friend of mine. And I said, hey, why don't we have Olivia on the show? Because she is the host of the Astrology podcast on Evolve Plus TV. And if you don't know what Evolve is, well, you're going to find out next week. I look forward to seeing you next week. We will get through these crazy energies together. If you need some hand-holding or community, come right into the Awake Space Patreon. It's a membership platform where you get wonderful benefits for being a member. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, and I look forward to talking to you soon.